Before we hit the Inca, we're going to talk about Timor, which, after the Inca, is like the largest state-level society, although some people have suggested it's a kingdom, or not necessarily a state in and of itself, but it did cover a big area, so it's this purple up here. So we're going to kind of go with more of the state-level society. It occurred in the Moche Valley, so we do see that it arose out of the earlier Moche state. Chan Chan is the site here. It appears to have been the capital. We see a series of walled compounds. You can see them all over the place here. And in these compounds we have interior courts that were for receiving subjects and guests. The elite lived on adobe structures within these compounds that are about 3 stories high. We find kind of cheaper construction for all of the retainers and people that worked for the elite within these constructions. These are referred to as ciudadelas. The smallest is about the size of 6 football fields, so we're talking about some fairly significant architectural feats here. Royal burials within these compounds include metal artifacts, sacrificial victims, primarily young women but also males, ceramics, very elaborate textiles. We find again these within the ciudadelas, so it appears that the king might have built the thing and then lived in it and then was buried in his kind of primary sleeping chamber maybe. And then the next king would be responsible for building his own ciudadela. So some people have suggested that we're seeing again that pattern of ancestor veneration continue here. Other people suggest, because there are only 9 of these complexes, that there were more than 9 Timor kings and that they actually built these for a couple of people to use and also built them in pairs. So again, that dual organization of the universe coming out in their city planning. We do find the U-shaped architectural structure appears as a motif in both textiles, on wood carvings, and ceramic statues. So again, through this whole Timor area, we find standardized ideology. We find Chimo craftspeople, after they're conquered by the Inca, actually make a lot of the elite artifacts. So they were highly skilled. But here's kind of a close-up. You can see some of the walls of these compounds, very elaborately decorated. And here's just another little close-up. So after the fall of Tiwanaku and Wari, in the highlands we see a number of small warring groups emerge. We find some overlap between the groups, which is causing conflict and competition for resources. What we also see start to happen is mechanisms to control this conflict, the process of gift giving first and then using threat or force. So again, trying to control some of the conflict that emerged there. Now, one of these groups was the Inca, and they first appear in the archaeological record around 950 BP. And shortly after that, they start a campaign of integration, and they did this in a number of ways. They intermarried with other groups. Sometimes they would convince people to join them without resistance, and then those people were conferred the status of Inca by privilege instead of being Inca by birth. Others they did take by force. They first focused in the Titicaca Basin, and that helped them to ensure their food supply, and then they started to move out from there. So the Inca lands is actually called the Land of the Four Quarters, or Tawantinsuyu. It's about 2,500 miles of the South American coast, an area of about 380,000 square miles. In fact, size-wise, I think only the Roman Empire was larger. So, the emperor was the Sapa Inca, the sun god, or the son of the sun god Inti. When the Inca died, they were mummified and then kept in their former residence or their quarters and then brought out for a special ritual. So again, we're seeing that ancestor veneration. We also see this idea of split inheritance, which actually was first suggested for like Chan Chan and the Timor. So the emperor was required to build his own compound, and then of course when the next emperor came into power, he was expected to build his own because all of the prior emperor's stuff was buried with him or interred with him. So again, that idea is called a split inheritance. Looks like it was adopted from Timur. The Inca had special privileges, carried around on litters, had special foods, and in fact, the Spanish reported if somebody was caught eating the Inca's special foods, they were put to death. Special clothing, and really, wined and dined, feted wherever he went. The Sapa Inca could appoint people to positions of authority, although those political appointments were relatively minor. For more important political positions, those were inherited, so kept within noble families. The royal palace in Cusco, which we're going to look at next, or the royal palace was in Cusco, but the Inca had estates elsewhere, so like Machu Picchu. And Bruce Owen, I found a lecture of his online, and he talks about Machu Picchu being a place for the Inca and his royal party to go hunting, but it was basically like this party palace. So I thought that was kind of a fun way to put it. Cusco is the capital, and I put the kind of correct spelling there, which is Qosqo. And in Cusco, we find some pretty interesting masonry. So it's all cut rock, just cut to go together. And I'm told that you can't get a quarter to slide in between these rocks. So they're actually cut quite well. Lots of labor going in this. The Spanish built Cusco, the modern city, on top of it as a way, of course, to assert their authority. The kind of layout of Cusco is seen to be like the head of a puma, or the whole thing is in the shape of a puma, so an important animal there. The Inca thought that Cusco was the navel of the known universe, so really kind of the center of it all. The city was composed of these high-walled enclosures called canchas, and these were the residences of royal lineages. One of the biggest and most elaborate of these canchas was the Coricancha, and here we can see a Catholic church was built on top of the remnants of the Coricancha, and within this we found temples to the sun and the moon. And according to one of the conquistadors, the Coricancha had a sacred garden where absolutely everything in the garden was made of gold. So we had dirt clods constructed out of gold, maize plants constructed out of gold, llamas with their attendants or their herders made out of gold. Of course, you can kind of think, since that's one of the things the Spanish king and queen were really looking for, that the conquistadors would have gone a little crazy seeing this whole garden just made out of gold. The Inca thought that Lake Titicaca was the place where gods resided and the sun was born. So again, this is where Tiwanakuns built all their kingdom. So some old ties there, but they used Lake Titicaca as a ceremonial center. So how did the Inca consolidate their power? They did this numerous ways. One of the things they would do is actually move rulers to Cusco, so they were de facto hostages. And if you're taking away that strong authority figure, it can result in a shift of authority to the Inca themselves. They would also gradually introduce Inca traits to groups. So they didn't come in and say, you will stop making what you're making and make all Inca stuff and adopt all Inca ways. They let them do that gradually over time. They also would provide food for people. So the Inca made use of the highlands really well, and I think I mentioned this in class, that they actually could naturally freeze dry food at the higher altitudes, and then if a group was having a bad agricultural year, they could get some food from the Inca administrative centers. They also constructed a massive road system. We're talking about 25,000 miles of roads. It spanned everything, these massive gorges, as you can see here, up the sides of the mountains, down the other side of the mountains. There was nothing that the Inca could not get over. This helped them to move people relatively quickly. They could move goods relatively quickly. They used the chasqui runners as a way to relay messages from administrative centers back to Cusco. And they would do this in a kind of a relay system. So evidently, the Spanish report that a chasqui runner could get information to Cusco within a period of 4 days from any point in the empire. So that's pretty impressive. And these roads are still used today. You can actually hike parts of the Inca Trail, particularly from Machu Picchu, and I'm told it's a really nice hike. I would probably take the train up and then hike down, but that's just me. But you can still go on the Inca trails today. The Inca also used something called the Mi'kmaq, and what this was is they moved people around to suit the needs of the empire, and this was a really good way to keep unruly people in line. So they would pack them up and ship them out to a new place. So it could have been